On February 24th, 1933, gangsters gunned down Dennis Zeigler here in Chicago. Zeigler died in his son's arms. He leaves behind 11 children and his wife, Edna.
I'm Lissa Morgans, and you're listening to Call Edna. Episode 18, The Murderer. Hello and welcome to the finale of Call Edna, the podcast where I'm investigating my great-great-grandfather's Prohibition-era murder. Before we get into the meat of today's episode, I wanted to thank you all as listeners for following along on this journey with me. It's been deeply personal to me and my family, and I couldn't have done it without the many people who helped me along the way, from research librarians to family members who I hadn't met before who opened up their homes so that I could see the papers that they'd collected over the years. And I loved hearing your theories on who you thought murdered Bruce and why. But before we get into your guesses, I wanted to check back in with my mom, my dad, and my grandmother for their thoughts on the investigation so far and their guesses on who murdered Bruce. Let's get into it. So in this last episode, I'm going to go through and interview a few of my family members that we've spoken to throughout the podcast. And here we have the first one. It is my mom.
Hi, Lissa.
You have been listening and following along. And do you have any thoughts on who murdered Bruce? Either who organized it or who actually pulled the trigger?
Oh, that's too hard. Give me the names again.
You want the names of everyone on the list? I can run down. You can say if you're suspicious of them. So starting with Edna's original list, we have William Maloney, John Lynch, and Lloyd Little.
Maloney and Lynch, I think, are possible. I think those were the original ones, and you spent a lot of time going into what you could find out about them.
Then we have Doty's addition to the list, which was William Green. And then we have the gangsters, racketeers, and various hitmen that we've gone over from Al Capone's unit and otherwise. So I'll give them to you a couple names at a time. Murray Humphreys, Charles Fischetti, and Frank Nitti.
It's like it can be any of them. I mean, it's so hard.
Mike Carrazzo.
Nah.
Three-fingered Jack White.
Possible.
Marcus Studdy Looney. William Klondike O'Donnell. These people kind of all run together. James Fur Salmon, Claude Screwy Maddox, Frank Diamond, Daniel Kane, and Sam Alex.
Again, I really can't say. I mean, I would just have to listen to the podcast a second time because you only take in so much information.
Yeah.
When you listen to it, and then there's some breaks, and then you listen again.
That is very fair. You don't have to have a guess. Is there any resolution that you'd like to see for this case or in general?
I think, it's the obvious one for the family. It would be nice if the family knew who killed Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, that's the biggest one.
So it would be the release of files for you, like if they could find and locate the files.
Yes, the police files. I understand you're looking for the inquest files, but also shouldn't there be police files that you were not able to obtain or nobody could find them, but they were somewhere?
Yeah, and the coroner's inquest should be located inside the police files.
Right. I think it's just it's a wonderful gift that you have given the family, even though in the end it's not clear at this point who killed Bruce.
Or maybe it is.
Oh, maybe it is.
No, I think that's a very, sunny day, then cloudy day way of looking at it. So I appreciate it.
But I have a question for you then. So
I'm being interviewed.
The family had the names, so could you figure out in any way why the family had those particular names, or really Bruce had given them those names? So there must have been a reason why he did. And did the family long ago still hold on that it was probably one of those three?
Yeah, so that was the list Bruce gave to Edna. And then, of course, we have the addition that Doty made that we have noted for the first time in the 50s.
That's right.
I'm not totally clear why she added that name. I think because of the souring of their relationship, but it has been so many years past. It's hard to know exactly why we have something and why we don't. And, Lloyd Little hadn't been involved, and Maloney had threatened Bruce and were involved in a court case. Lynch and Little had also threatened Bruce. So there's very clear direct lines between threats with them and then murdering Bruce.
Right.
But I don't think the family had as good of an impression on who from gangland would have actually carried out the hit.
Right.
And I think they were more focused on who ordered it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's the people that were dealing with Bruce, and then there was a separate group of characters who actually carried out the hits.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think they had some guesses on that, and obviously the papers floated a few names, but I don't think those were the names they were as intimately familiar with as opposed to the union people who they were much more connected to.
Yes.
Yeah. So that would be my gathering, but I mean, from what I hear from most family tales, it's that everyone says it was Maloney, who I think is obviously very involved, but is not the person who pulled the trigger.
Right.
And now for my grandma, whose interviews started off this podcast.
Okay, now what are the questions?
So I wanted to tell you a little bit about what I've learned during my investigation, and I wanted to ask you some questions.
Okay, whether it's true or have I ever heard of it or something like that, right?
Yeah, last time we spoke, you kind of told me in your words what you thought the story was of Bruce's murder. So you can tell me that again if you want.
Well, I didn't know the family when he died, when he was murdered. I only learned about this when I met Grandpa Dave.
Yes, because it's his family. When Dave would tell you the story, what would he tell you about it?
Well, truth is, it's very long ago. And of course, I was in awe that, somebody had been murdered, although it was Chicago. They had a lot of murders.
They really did.
He was a union man. He worked for the railroad or a trucking company. I'm not exactly sure who he worked for.
Do you think he worked in the trucking industry? I have that he worked in construction with hoisting, but I'm really curious about...
Oh, he was a hoisting engineer.
Yeah.
Yeah, construction, that's right. And he was murdered because he belonged to a union.
Yes.
And the gangsters, I think I told you all that, so the gangsters wanted to get into the union because they saw money in it. So he I don't know whether he let the owners of the business know. It's a long, long time ago, so I may not have everything straight.
That's okay, you're perfect.
But he let somebody know that the gangsters were trying to get into the union and they could make money on it. And, of course, the gangsters weren't too happy about that.
Yeah.
This was Chicago I believe in the 20s, but I'm not exactly sure of the date. So, of course, the gangsters were very active then, so they warned him, didn't keep his mouth shut, so they killed him.
Do you remember hearing about any court cases that he was involved in?
No, because I didn't know the family at the time of this happened. So if there was any court cases, it was somebody I didn't know.
Okay, and they didn't pass that down in stories to you when they talked about him?
No, not that I recall now. It's a long time ago,
Oh, my goodness, I know it is. In the family in general, did they talk about him a lot?
Not all the time. On occasion. Not necessarily like if it was Thanksgiving or Christmas, they didn't bring up Pop. Especially since I came into the family and I wanted to know a little bit about it.
Yeah.
They would tell me a little story about what this happened and that happened. But it wasn't necessarily the main conversation.
Yeah.
But it did affect them all tremendously.
I didn't get to meet Edna either.
Oh, she's amazing.
I hear such good things about her.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so
Amazing.
jealous I didn't get to meet her. She sounded like quite a person and really funny, too.
And, yeah, she was funny, and she was so, she had 11 kids, I think.
Yeah, she did.
And they weren't rich, but she managed.
Did you ever hear any stories about Bruce's other family, like his brother?
Not that I recall. I don't know if he even had a brother. I don't recall any of that.
Okay. So if if he did have a brother or something lived in Chicago, you guys didn't go to family events with them.
That's right. That's correct.
And did you go to a lot of like Zeigler family events in like the 50s and 60s? Or?
Oh, yes, because it's a big family. And Grandma
Yeah.
Zeigler had gatherings, and then Grandma Sarah. And then so did the other kids. Aunt Pauline had a big house. Some of the other children had big houses. And you had to have a big house because it was such a big family. When they
Yeah.
have a Christmas dinner, you had to have a lot of room.
Well, something I've been investigating is just how many people were involved in the night of Bruce's murder. And you're the first person I'm telling, but I think it's upwards of maybe 6 to 8 individuals who coordinated the murder.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's really quite a conspiracy.
Well, they were gangsters. That's all I know.
Well, and that's all the questions I have for you. So thank you, Grandma.
But did I give you any good information?
You gave me great information.
Thank you.
Of course. And that brings us to Gary.
My name is Gary Morgans. I live in Arlington, Virginia, for a discussion of contemporary murder issues with my daughter, Lissa.
Welcome to the
Thank
show.
you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
What are your credentials?
My credentials are that I am Lissa's dad, so that gives me gets me in the front door, and also I am my great grandpa Zeigler's great grandson, and so that gives me an interest. Oh, and third, as I'll be explaining soon, I talk to people from time to time who were contemporaries of my great grandfather, very briefly about his murder.
Well, it's our last interview. It's our last time for now chatting about Call Edna. And I wanted to ask you how you felt the investigation has gone.
The investigation has been incredible. And I guess the two takeaways I have, the first takeaway I have is I had no idea how prominent a labor union leader my great-grandfather was. He was very prominent in the labor union movement. I guess my second big takeaway, I have three. My second big takeaway is he was a man of extreme dedication to his union. I doubt I would have done the same things that he did, given the risks to my family. I don't think I have the guts to do that. And third, not related to my great-grandfather, but the amount of detail regarding his murder that you developed was just over the top, just so incredible. I had no idea there was all this information out there. Of course, I know you had to do a little digging to find it, but I had no idea all this information existed.
Was his involvement in lawsuits and within the courts anything you had heard about before?
No.
Did that really surprise you?
Very much so. I mean, especially since I'm a lawyer.
Yeah.
And, my grandmother, his daughter, passed away 21 years after I passed the bar. And she never mentioned that he was, at least to the best of my recollection, that he was involved in the legal process as well.
And you weren't the only lawyer in the family. Your older brother became a lawyer too.
That's right. I don't know whether she had any discussions with my older brother about that as well.
It's something that I found also as a lawyer very interesting, particularly as someone whose last job was class action based, and the amount of stress those people take on behalf of their class, and knowing that Bruce did that on behalf of his union in multiple lawsuits is really extraordinary.
Yeah, and of course, the one difference, I think, at least I hope it's a difference between the cases you were involved in and the case that my great-grandfather was involved in is your involvement carries the risk of death.
One thing that I'm upset about is the lack of police records and coroner's records that we've been able to obtain. How do you feel about that?
Well, I see it both ways. I could see that it's possible that the police records do no longer exist. I could see that possibility happening. A second, I could also see that even if the records do exist, the police have a lot of work to do, and may not find that devoting their attention to a murder that occurred 93 years ago is worth their effort, and I can understand that too. But on the third part, though, this was a major event in the history of Chicago, Illinois, and I don't think we're asking for that much effort on their behalf to dig a little deeper and see if they could find it. So assuming the records do exist, I suspect they haven't looked all that hard, but that's just my suspicion.
Well, it's kind of how the process is set up, is that you only have to make a reasonable effort, and a lot of these records are non-digitized. They're probably in a basement somewhere. They're hard to locate. I could see a variety of factors impacting a search, but at the same time, when you request it from so many different bodies, you'd expect maybe one might come up with something.
Right. I guess part of it, what I'm thinking is that this isn't simply an information request so that you can have fun information to read over tea someday. You're investigating a murder, which is their job. And this is something that should be of assistance to them. That's one of the reasons why it's important to get the records. There's two reasons. One, to get to the bottom of what happened, but two, to find out how thorough this investigation really was, because I have a suspicion that, like so many things in Chicago in 1933, this guy or that guy was on the take and in some way had some involvement with the mob, and the lack of investigation may be evidence itself.
Yeah, and I think something that stood out to me is when there was renewed interest in the case in the 1940s, I read statements in the Chicago newspapers about how they were continuing to investigate. And then when I read about the files in the 1950s, it very eloquently states that there is no additional record in the file beyond March 14th of 1933.
That makes sense.
Something I wanted to ask you, and you don't have to answer. Do you have a guess as to who pulled the trigger, or who was in the car, or who was the main organizer of Bruce's murder?
Yes, I do.
What are your guesses?
My belief is that the main organizer, the cruise director of this whole episode, was William Maloney. And I believe that for fundamentally three reasons. One, he was one of the individuals who my great-grandfather identified as the person likely to murder him. Number two, he had a clear motive to get at my great-grandfather because of his union activities, but because of his effort to advise the United States government about the tax evasion that Maloney was involved in. So he's clear motive to go after my great-grandfather. I said three reasons, there's four. The third reason is Maloney, maybe I've got this, my recollection is confused, tried to assassinate him once before. And made threat upon threat against my great-grandfather. That's my recollection of the file. And fourth, I spoke with many contemporaries of my great-grandfather, that is to say, his children, and I spoke with them in this, and also his wife, and I spoke with them in the 60s and 70s and 80s. I don't recall specific conversations, but I do recall specifically that my relatives told me that Maloney killed their dad. And so they were there. My grandma Sarah was married with one child, my dad, when my great-grandfather was assassinated. So she was in her, I think, mid to late 20s. So she was certainly I'm sure, so cognizant of everything that was going on. Her older sister, Pauline, as well, and they were already out of the house, so they knew what was going on. I regret that I didn't talk to them more about it, but over the years, that's what they've told me. And I talked to my great-grandma, Edna, who we knew was great-grandma Zeigler, many times, because we used to travel to Chicago all the time and visit family, and so we would see great-grandma Zeigler. So we would see the whole damn family, or the whole famdamly. So I don't remember when they told me that Maloney was the guy, but they told me on numerous occasions. And I tend to remember Aunt Pauline telling me that because she was a talker. So that's who I think was in charge. I don't think he pulled the trigger. I think the person who pulled the trigger was Lynch.
Yeah.
Now, he was another one of the people who my great-grandfather identified as one of, I believe, the three people who would have been likely to murder him. And I pick him because he was, I think, as I recall, a close associate of Maloney and basically would have done what Maloney told him to do.
Definitely.
I can't remember if there's any record of Lynch murdering anybody else. I don't remember that. I kind of remember him being Maloney's right-hand man, so he seems like the perfect one to do this. And I would think there might be a third person who would just be a driver, and I don't know who that would be. That could be anybody. I could see where Maloney was sitting in the back seat of the car. That'd be my best guess.
So you think Maloney's in the car? You don't think he was somewhere else?
No, I think he was in the car. Yes.
You think he wanted to see it happen?
Yes, that's what I think happened. Yes. I doubt he was the driver of the car.
He's the extra person sitting in the car because there's three in the car: driver, shooter, extra.
That's right. That's my best analysis of the situation. I would think Maloney would definitely be there. You know, having chased my great-grandfather down the street in broad daylight, I would think he would be there to watch him get executed on the street by Mr. Lynch, because this was a big deal for them to finally execute this man and remove that thorn from their side. And also, given the fact that my great-grandfather was trying to get Maloney investigated for tax evasion, I could see Maloney would want to watch this and watch him die. So that's my analysis.
It's quite elaborate how they knew his schedule down to a T. Do you think someone was watching him, stalking him to understand his schedule for weeks or just day of? Or what do you think about that?
I think he was routinely stalked.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because, they tried to kidnap his youngest son, Uncle Ted, my great Uncle Ted, a couple of times. And, they had a Chicago policeman sleeping in there, with round-the-clock protection. I presume that was because there were people, who were a constant threat, and there were people who were watching him. So, no, I'm sure they cased it. He probably followed the same route home most nights, would be my guess. And
in terms of the lights, for who cut the lights, do you think it was someone in the car? Do you think it was an associate they dropped off earlier? Or do you think it was someone in the neighborhood who they made work with them against Bruce?
I haven't thought about that a great deal, even though electricity is my area. And I would guess that would have been a different person if the lights were indeed cut off. That would have been a different person who cut the lights.
So do you think it was someone in the mob who was sort of a specialist at that kind of thing? Or do you think it could have just been someone who they said, hey, clip the wire here?
I doubt it was a specialist. It makes more sense to me that once they clipped it, they skedaddled.
Yeah.
And that someone else restored the electricity. It doesn't make sense to me that they would
take the time.
Yeah, because now there's a dead guy lying on the street, and you're a block away connecting up some wires.
Doesn't make any sense.
No, it's going to look a little suspicious too.
And then something I've been thinking about a lot is the timing of clipping the wire, because I'm imagining Bruce walking home. He's anxious. He's been getting threats. If while he's walking, the lights went out.
I'm just going to hazard a guess with no real reason. My guess is that they clipped it in plenty of time.
I think so too.
And he was just walking home, and probably it wouldn't surprise me. He's concentrating on getting home to his family, and he probably didn't even notice the lights were out. That would be my supposition.
That's what I tend to think, because I think he was increasingly paranoid of people harming him in February of 1933.
Yes.
And if on his walk the lights went, I think he would run. I don't think he would continue to walk home. I think he would take a different direction. I think he would be nervous. So, although he was a block away, maybe he thought he could make it. But that makes me believe the lights were off 5-10 minutes before his streetcar came in.
That makes sense.
Is there anything you'd like to see happen as a result of this? Is there any resolution that you see?
Yes.
What resolution do you want?
I'd like to see my daughter write a book.
Oh, oh my God. This is the first time you've mentioned it.
You asked.
Oh my. On Bruce's story as the anchor or on like labor history in general?
On my great-grandfather's assassination.
Wow. Well, for that, I think we need the records. But maybe.
Counselor, next time don't ask a question you don't know the answer to.
I thought you were going to say, like, you want a plaque in Chicago or something of that, like.
I've always thought that might be an appropriate thing to do, to put some kind of plaque on the sidewalk. Yeah, I think that'd be a really nice thing to have.
Any other concluding thoughts?
Well, as you can infer from my comment that I thought you should write a book to memorialize all this for future generations, I was just very impressed with the amount of detail that you were able to pull up and the degree to which you're able to synthesize that detail into a living story. So that's just wanted to leave that comment for you.
That's really sweet. I really appreciate it. I think when I started this project, I had no idea what I was going to unearth in this time period. I knew it was very turbulent in Chicago history. I knew general context. I didn't know how intense it would be, and that almost every episode I come across a side story of something so fascinating, and it's almost like 5 to 10 side stories per episode because this time period just is so alive. There's just so much to talk about it.
One thing I forgot to mention earlier is, well, as I mentioned earlier, I had many contacts with my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and some of my great aunts, and I'm sure that they mentioned from time to time that Maloney was the guy. And I remember Aunt Pauline in particular, I believe, told me that. And so these were usually gatherings at my great-grandma's house or at Aunt Pauline's house. But the one thing I forgot to mention was that I attended great-grandma Zeigler's 80th birthday party, which was at a Chinese restaurant somewhere in the northwest side of Chicago. And there were at least 100 people there. So that would have been most, if not all, of her then living children and assorted relatives. Of course, when you have 11 kids, you have a lot of assorted relatives. But I'm sure there were conversations amongst the members of the family about the great-grandpa Zeigler's assassination back in 1933. I may have heard some comments back then, but that was quite a watershed event.
When you were going to all these Zeigler family events with the Chicago family, did you ever meet any of Bruce's brothers or any of their family, extended family?
Not that I recall.
When you were growing up and when you attended these parties, when people spoke about Bruce, what did people talk about? Did they talk about his murder or did they more talk about him as a person?
I don't remember. The only thing I remember from all those conversations is them telling me that a fellow named Maloney killed their dad. That's the only piece of information that I remember.
That makes sense to me too, because that's what was passed on to me as the next generation. I also had the name Maloney from the get. So I've always thought he's been the coordinator, but knowing just how many people were involved in this murder has been astonishing. And I think we'll end with, after the last episode, and there might be a bonus episode or two later, we should go back to the National Archives, and I want to take you through the court papers so you can see the original papers yourself and Bruce's signature for the federal court case here in D.C.
That sounds like a great idea. I'll skip my nap that day.
Well, thank you so much. You've been a big part of this process, and it means a lot.
Thank you.
And now for your theories, starting off with one of my favorite calls I received.
Hey, Lissa. Bye.
But actually getting into it, hearing from one of our listeners.
Dear Edna, this is Catherine Hamilton, a devoted listener. First, thank you for raising up the person of Dennis Bruce Zeigler. It's clear he was a dedicated father, engineer, friend, and union leader. In fact, based on your extensive research, it seems he was an incredibly important figure in workers' rights, so much so that the entire government, law enforcement, and racketeering establishments joined the forces to plot, carry out, and cover up his murder. I believe it is not an accident that his killer was never found and brought to justice. My guess on the mastermind behind the deed was William Maloney. He may not have pulled the trigger, but the evidence you lay out points to Maloney orchestrating the hit and ensuring the escape of the crew that was hired to perform it. I also think he had help from the police and others in the Chicago system, making it nearly impossible for anyone to be held accountable for his assassination. Thank you for bringing this story into the sunlight. My guess is your great-great-grandfather Bruce would be really proud.
In addition to that being a really sweet sentiment at the end, I totally agree with the perspective not only of William Maloney being clearly one of the main motivators carrying out this hit, who's this mastermind acting in the background, and I love the reference to the police being very complicit and maybe a step over complicit in actually helping organize or actively cover up the murder. I thought about this a lot leading up to today's episode and exactly what I would say in terms of who murdered Bruce. And that's because we won't know with 100% certainty what happened. But I think I have some pretty good guesses. And each time I come up with a theory, I come back to the police. Sometimes I can picture them being involved day of, helping coordinate the murder, but their role in the days after is clear. No one is ever actually arrested, potentially even questioned really, or tried for Bruce's murder. And it's evident that there's a shift from the reporting the day after the murder to what takes place in the next 2 weeks before the files eventually closed. And I don't think you could get to that place if the police weren't in on it as well. And now for our next theory.
I think Maloney and Lynch were the brains and the instigators. I think Sam, Alex, and Humphreys were both involved, but I'm not entirely sure on their roles. And I think James Sammons was likely involved, probably as a driver. I hope I'm right.
This one has so many heavy hitters in it and names that I've played around with as well. I'm not going to disclose exactly who I think it is quite yet, but I think we see these names come up a lot. And as we know, Sammons was a getaway driver in an incident just a few weeks prior. So I do think that's a pretty accurate guess. And the theme of Maloney and Lynch sort of being the masterminds together, and as Gary pointed out, was very reflective of their relationship in general. It seems to me that where Maloney went, Lynch went. And Humphrey's role is one I've struggled with for a while. He's a very high-profile gangster at this time. So is Bruce of such a status that Humphreys would have to get involved in taking him out? I think maybe, but I'm not certain. And next one.
I'm afraid I got to go with an obvious one, but I think it was Sam Alex. Sam R.I.P. Alex. I think Maloney and Lynch were probably in the car, but Alex was much more, I think, tied into the mainline mob. Whole family, his brothers, were all associated with the mob. And as I've said from the beginning of this thing, Tom Courtney was complicit, if not useful, in the whole enterprise. If he'd wanted a serious investigation, there would have been one. And who knows if it had anything to do with his original placement as district attorney or state's attorney, whatever it's called. But I'm sure that nothing went on or didn't go on without him knowing. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Look forward to hearing the next installment in the results. Bye.
This is something I've thought a lot about as well. Is it Maloney and Lynch in the car with the shooter, who seems to be someone who I think would have to be a professional so that they would ensure that Bruce was murdered? And I really like the point about Thomas Courtney, and I do think he made the political trade-off of not investigating Bruce's murder for the TNT prosecution. That investigation had already begun, And I think he was already starting to see really good press coverage from that. And I think he looked to extend that press coverage in his favor. I mean, we have the initial investigation starting in 1932 at least, and it goes until what, 1934, 1935? So that's a couple years of really good anti-racketeering press for him. And I think Bruce's murder came at a particularly interesting time in that way, where the news of what was going on with Anton Cermak and Roosevelt taking office could almost kind of eclipse what happened in this period in Chicago history. So while Bruce was a large figure at the time, honestly, in Chicago, there were other larger things going on to distract the public. And I think Courtney leveraged that in his favor, because I totally agree. If he wanted to investigate it, he would have. And I tend to think he knew who did it, and he didn't even need to do an investigation. I think he and Dale Gilbert knew pretty soon thereafter. And next one.
8. I think it was an inside job. I don't have a name, but I think this was an initiation ritual that was carried out to ensure that this person earned the trust of Maloney and solidified their position as part of the Al Capone's mob.
I am really intrigued by this one because it's also a theory that I had been thinking of. Is there anyone on the rise at this time who sort of needs a boost by murdering Bruce, either in the union world, in the racketeering world, or in the complete Chicago criminal boss underworld? And that had me go when I was developing my own theories about what exactly happened, to who directly benefited from Bruce being murdered, who had a change in job title from 1933 to 34 that reflected upward mobility, gaining power and control because of Bruce's murder. I think you could obviously argue that Maloney benefited in that way, but was there someone else who could participate in the hit who would gain in reputation? It's something worth thinking about. And on to the next.
It was Gary.
Gary as a time traveler is by far my favorite theory. We have 2 more.
I'm calling to leave my choice. So you officially convinced me. I am Team Maloney, even though I was a hater at first. It seems like he just had way too much beef with Bruce to not be part of it. But I don't think that he shot him. But I do think he was in the car to make sure it got done. And that's it.
That's a question that's been pretty central to the latter half of this investigation, is filling the roles of who was in the car and whether or not Maloney should be placed there. And I think it's been one of the biggest challenges in developing my theory as to who did it. Because I think if you place Maloney in the car, you almost have to place Lynch there as well, similar to another one of the theories. And then if you have Maloney and Lynch and then the shooter, you don't have an experienced getaway driver. So would they have made that trade-off? I think it's really possible given the personal vendetta. You heard it from Gary. He definitely thinks he was. And I really see the argument for that. It's kind of hard to think if he was this huge mastermind, wouldn't he want to be there, seeing the job get done? And our last voicemail.
Hi, this is Nicole. I'm calling in for my theory. I think that Maloney was behind the hit, but wouldn't have been in the car. I think that in the car full of gangsters, my best guess would be that someone like Charles Fischetti or Lloyd Little would be leading the group in the car just to make sure that it got done and overseeing the operation. I do think that Sam Alex actually did pull the trigger, and that Maloney was involved in ensuring that he was always covered and he would never actually get arrested. As far as the third person in the car, probably the driver. My best guess would be Marcus Looney. He always somehow seems to be involved in murders, but not actually the shooter or the leader. He's just always there. And so Marcus Looney seems like a good character to pit as the driver. But I think the most interesting part of the whole Sam Alex thing is that the police knew that it was probably him, but that he would never get pursued. And the fact that they told the family that it would cost money to find him privately, that shows that it's not in the public interest to even pursue the main suspect, meaning that they knew that he was consistently protected by the state. And so that, to me, is the strongest predictor that Sam Alex is always being protected and that he is probably the person that's most likely in that area to be involved. That's my theory. Thanks.
I totally agree with a lot of what's been said about Sam Alex here. And it goes to what another listener said in terms of Sam Alex also having that brother who becomes really important in the Chicago outfit as we progress into the 1940s and 50s. And I think his protected status is really indicated here. And he maintains that protected status until the time of his death. I believe he dies in the 1980s. He's around for a long time. And of course, we have the introduction for the first time of Looney. And I totally agree that this is a name that I just see around all the time, kind of similar to O'Donnell or others. They just always seem to be implicated in some type of nefarious conduct going around murders at this time. And in all, I think the points about Sam Alex are really well taken. So this is my theory. Obviously, whoever murdered Bruce knew where he lived. We have multiple kidnapping attempts at the house cataloged, and they also knew where he worked. We have multiple threats happening where his local operated out of. And in addition to these incidents that happened in the years prior to his murder, I do believe that someone stalked his schedule so they knew roughly when he left and came home. And on the night of the murder, I think it's likely that Bruce left Union headquarters, which was 612 West Adams Street downtown, and that someone from Maloney and Lynch's team watched him leave. Their union, Local 150, was also based downtown just a few blocks away, and I do believe that either they or someone else could have watched him board the streetcar to confirm, based on the timetables, just about exactly when he would get home that day. And I think once they confirmed he got on the streetcar, they made a telephone call for the plan to proceed in motion. So to begin counting how many people are involved in this conspiracy, we're at least 2. The person who watched Bruce, although it could have been multiple, and the person he called. And something I wanted to address, because I've been thinking about it so much, is why not kill Bruce downtown or on the streetcar? And I think that's because there was too large of a possibility of missing him or not killing him, but injuring him or causing too much press. Remember in 1930 when Alfred Lingle is shot downtown and it caused a huge stir, a stir that the mob didn't want. And a few weeks prior, there was an attempt to kill someone on the streetcar between 2 gangs who had a fight. But to my knowledge, no one was killed in that, and there were just injuries. So it wasn't a guaranteed hit like they needed to take out Bruce if they attacked him on the streetcar. So hitting someone at their house in close range would have been the best case scenario. And then they also amplified the facts in their favor. Not only would it be at close range, they were going to do it when the lights are off, purposely having the lights turned off in the neighborhood. And that also begs another question. Why wasn't Bruce killed directly in front of his house? Why was he killed a block from his house instead of directly in front? And my best guess is that given how many family members Bruce had at his home, it would be a cleaner hit if they were just out of reach. So rather than do it on his block, do it the block before. And as we recall, there were previous attempts to kidnap Bruce's children, and also Bruce was threatened at work. But Bruce and his children were able to get out of both situations safely. And then they got police protection for a year and a half. So this was a shot that they couldn't gamble on. They couldn't clumsily miss this hit because they risked Bruce getting police protection potentially again, or some other alternative making it much harder to take him out. So this had to be well thought through and executed. And why do I think they confirmed his timing getting on the streetcar instead of just relying on past intel or on intel of when he got off the streetcar? There's a couple reasons. I think because they planned to do the murder in the dark with the lights out. They didn't want a chance cutting the wire and then Bruce not show up. They wanted to know that Bruce was on the way so that they could plan when to cut the wire accordingly. If they had tried cutting the lights previously and then Bruce wasn't murdered, we also would have heard that information in some of the accounts. Like, oh, this was the second or third time this neighborhood has had the streetlights out in 3 weeks or something like that. But we didn't hear any type of account like that. We heard that it was unexplainedly out of order on that night. And we weren't given an indication of the time, but I have to think that Bruce would have run if the lights were cut as he was walking. So I think they had to be cut sort of in the perfect amount of time. Not enough that someone could call the city or public utility to get them fixed, but not too soon to when he's getting off the streetcar that his suspicions are aroused. And back to the telephone call I'm assuming happened, confirming that Bruce got on the streetcar. Something I'm really, really troubled with is where's the location of that call? Specifically, where did they call to? Al Capone's gang is obviously based in Cicero, Illinois, but Cicero is 7 miles south of Bruce's neighborhood. And I think that would be cutting it too close to call someone in Cicero and have them send a car out to Old Irving Park. And same with the people who were watching him in the loop. That's also pretty far. They wouldn't be able to reliably make it to Old Irving Park in time to get the whole setup in place. Someone would have to be closer. Someone who they could control. Maybe someone they could threaten. So I thought maybe it's a neighbor. Maybe a neighbor with knowledge of the electrical grid. And according to the 1930 census, there were multiple people in Bruce's neighborhood who might fit the bill. There was a department manager for the electric public utility, and he had a family. There was a mechanical engineer working for an electrical company, also with a family. There was a telephone line installer. There was also a boss with an electrical supply manufacturing company, and that's just within a block or two of Bruce. And Maloney had a network, and so did Al Capone's outfit, and so did the police. So maybe through Maloney's network, they were able to find one of these men and get them to clip the wire, or maybe Captain Daniel Gilbert's reporting that the lights were turned off and not cut was accurate, given the professions of some of these men. Maybe they knew how to turn them off, or maybe someone from the city or the police helped them. So getting back to the call, where exactly did they call to? Part of me thinks maybe they called a neighbor at their house, a neighbor who was under threat or duress by the 3 people who are going to carry out the hit and drive away in the getaway car. I also think it's possible that they took up residence in a local business in order to receive the call, but I do think it would be easier to have that call at someone's home. It's a little more streamlined, and it's not like they have a ton of extra time with Bruce on the streetcar. And that also got me thinking, if that's the case, and there's a neighbor who's been threatened, the threat would need to feel really real. And the best threat to someone would be to their family, just like it was for Bruce, threatening a man's wife or children. And interestingly, in my research of other Union members and persons murdered in Chicago in the 1930s and 40s, I didn't find a fact pattern where the streetlights were cut or turned off. So this makes Bruce's case specific and unique. And although in 1933 it was described as a typical gangland-style murder, I think this specific fact makes it not the typical murder because it acknowledges premeditation and skilled planning as opposed to a lazy threat like, oh, we'll bomb this place, they're not cooperating, or let's threaten this person next time we see them. This involved a degree of meticulous planning on a timetable. So I think the gangsters carrying out the hit received the call at a person's house. And I'm not sure if all 3 from the car were in the house or not. Maybe they sent in 2, leaving the getaway driver in the car, or maybe they all went in. That's something I'll never be able to know. But they had the person clip the wire or turn off the electricity in advance of Bruce's murder. But again, it couldn't be too far in advance that other neighbors would report it. And I do think Bruce would be spooked if it was cut while he was walking. I think they knew roughly when the streetcar would arrive and where he would be walking. And that led me to yet another question. Why don't I think someone was waving at the arrival end of the streetcar for Bruce to get off and give some sort of signal and set the plan in motion? In some ways, that's a lot easier of a plan. Like, hey, you have someone at the streetcar exit, they see Bruce get off, they give a signal, and then the murder happens. But I eliminated this because of the streetlights. That required too much premeditation to go with the back end plan. They had to have known on the front end what streetcar he was getting on. And that's because it would be too soon from getting off the streetcar to turn off the lights or clip the wire, because I walked the path that we assume Bruce walked from the streetcar to his home. And that path is quick. It's a few blocks, maybe a 5-minute walk. And he's actually shot a block sooner than his house. So it would only be a few minutes from when he got off to where he was shot. And the way the getaway car approached Bruce was from the north, because it drove south on Tripp Avenue. And Bruce's streetcar stop, or the one we believe was his stop, was south of his house, not north. So it's not like they could have been watching him from that vantage point. And I think it would have been way too tight to have someone positioned there and then coordinate some sort of signal, because again, if you would view the lights going off as a signal, I think that would have really freaked Bruce out. I think you would have had him running or taking a different route if that had happened. And when you look at this route on a map, it's really tight. So I'm not even sure how feasible it would be to have someone placed at the streetcar stop to give a signal to someone else located elsewhere. I'm not even sure they'd be able to clip the lights from the signal point. It just gets really complex. And that's why I think they timed it based on when he got on the car and not a signal-based system when he got off. And we know that the car had 3 people in it. So the conspiracy is at a minimum of 5 people coordinating this murder. And who do I think shot Bruce? I agree with a lot of our listeners. I think it was Sam Alex. I think the initial reporting was accurate. And Alex was someone well protected in Al Capone's outfit, not only because of his Capone affiliation, but because of his brother's rise within the unit. Gus Alex, his younger brother, will become a very high-ranking member of the outfit, similar to the level or status of Humphreys. And Alex's role in this also just makes sense. He gets a direct reward. He becomes a business agent for the Excavators and Asphalt Teamsters Union, reportedly for the first time in 1934. And I think he obtained that benefit from Mike Carrazzo, close friend of William Maloney, who was in charge of paving. So I don't just think it was Maloney and his 2 cronies, Little and Lynch, who wanted Bruce dead. I think Bruce got too close to some paving contracts in January and February of 1933, and I think it got Carrazzo's attention. And I think it was the duo of Carrazzo and Maloney who put this plan in motion. And that also makes sense to me, given that this wasn't a typical hit. Given the lights, there was an additional layer of camouflage. This could serve 2 purposes. Either they wanted to camouflage who was in the car, or they wanted to make sure that Bruce couldn't see anything so that he wouldn't be spooked, or maybe both. We've heard about so many hits taking place during the day, and a lot of main mob figures didn't seem to mind being seen. But here there was deliberate action to conceal their identity. Why? Is it because it's Maloney and Lynch in the car? That's what I thought for a long time. But I've come to another conclusion. Maloney was a coward. I don't think he had it in him to carry out the hit or even watch it be done. I think similar to Huddle's murder, where I believe Maloney was a part organizer, potentially with Postle, he sent other people to do his dirty work. And what he learned from Huddle's murder is that being out in public in the daylight caused issues. As we know, Huddle doesn't die on scene, but dies 10 days later, allegedly of an unrelated injury, which you and I don't believe. So where are Maloney and Lynch then? I think they're downtown at their office in the Loop. And I think they or an associate of theirs, maybe Little, watch Bruce get on the streetcar. And I think they're the ones who make the call to say it's happening. And who's with Sam Alex? I think the getaway driver is experienced. It could easily be Salmons, who was a getaway driver a few weeks prior and also didn't mind dressing in disguise. Salmons was also one of the men Maloney sent to protect another member of the International as one of the bodyguards in 1932. And that got me thinking, okay, if we're placing Alex and Salmons in the car, who's the third? And this third person would have to be powerful, right? I think they're the reason why the group was able to get neighborhood help. So their presence is either intimidating or they're well connected, and they don't mind getting their hands dirty, unlike Maloney, who I think is all talk and no action. And I think it's someone who you believe when they threaten you. And that leaves open a lot of people. Looney had a reputation for having killed other Union officials. Humphreys had a reputation for ordering bombings and kidnappings, although I'm not sure he would actually do all those himself unless it felt personal to him, and I'm not sure Bruce's murder was all that personal to him. O'Donnell is possibly looking for upward mobility in the gang, having come from another gang, and then he's sort of acting as Jack Three-Fingered White's henchman, so maybe he needed to prove himself. And as a trio, Humphreys, O'Donnell, and White acted as a unit threatening unions, just like the bombing of the Lake Forest Union official in May of 1933, and White himself is implicated in a murder just a month prior, the murder of Ted Newberry. But remember, I think this person is supposed to be very intimidating. So could it possibly be the duo of White and O'Donnell and not Salmons driving? Or is it Carrazzo? Is he Maloney's eyes and ears during the shooting itself? Is he proving himself to Maloney? But then I thought, is he really powerful enough of a figure, imposing enough as a figure, along with Sam Alex and Salmons to get the job done? I mean, with weapons, anyone can be imposing enough, I guess. But that got me thinking about another thing, a different type of intimidation, not the intimidation that weapons offer, but the intimidation that an official of the law would offer. Is an officer of the law, like Gilbert, the third person? And if Maloney and Carrazzo are involved in this period of time, who's on the outskirts? Who else is benefiting from this murder? We have William Green, who thinks he's going to be appointed as labor secretary in just a few weeks so he can't ruffle any feathers by standing up for Bruce. And then we have Thomas Courtney, who's pursuing his hollow TNT investigation. And that brings us to Daniel Gilbert, a man who will help obtain perjured testimony against Roger Toohey along with the state in prosecuting him for a kidnapping that he didn't commit. So who's more culpable? Is it the men who did the hit, who orchestrated it, or who worked for a system to help systemically cover it up? And here's another thing, something we haven't talked about yet. You may have been wondering, because we've spoken a lot about Bruce and his family with Edna and their 11 children, because it's a lot of kids, so I bring it up a lot. But I haven't really mentioned Bruce's family. And that's because no one else in my family who I spoke to did either. And with Bruce and Edna moving to Chicago, I assumed they embarked on that new life together. It didn't occur to me that they could have been following another family member, or that a family member could have followed them out there, because I didn't come across anything like that in all of my court paper readings or files from the attic. That is, until I read them again, and I came across one paper that reads, quote, members taken into local number 569, and it lists the names and dates of admittance, beginning in November of 1929 and ending in August of 1931, after the fight with Local 150 started. And two names stood out to me, Arthur A. Zeigler, June 3, 1931, and William Q. Zeigler, August 12, 1931. After the Cook County lawsuits had been filed, and after the federal lawsuit had been filed. And do they have any relation to Bruce? William is Bruce's older brother, and Arthur is William's son, Bruce's nephew, and they were both hoisting engineers who joined Bruce's union during the fight against Maloney. And according to the 1930 and 1940 census, their family home on Keeler Ave was less than a mile away from Bruce's house on Tripp Avenue. So why didn't anyone I spoke to know anything about them? And how did they remain safe while Bruce was murdered? And why is William's name listed in a newspaper article as someone who testified in Bruce's coroner's inquest, which I requested from the Cook County Medical Examiner's office? But after a search was made, no records were found. This conspiracy and mystery isn't solved, and you may be hearing from me in the future. As ever yours, Lissa.